They were popping champagne on September 1st. By September 26th, the mood had flipped so fast, it felt like the baseball gods had pulled a full reset on the season. The Detroit Tigers, a team that spent the summer looking like it belonged in October, went from a nearly certain division winner to clinging to their postseason life. And the Cleveland Guardians mounted a comeback so furious, it's rewriting the modern record book. Fangraphs Baseball. How wild is the swing? Fangraphs had Detroit basically bulletproof early in September, the kind of probability that usually requires champagne and a victory lap. Then, in a little more than 2 weeks, Detroit unraveled, losing 11 of 12 games during the slide and dropping 20 of 27 at one point. It wasn't a hiccup, it was a free fall. Fangraphs Baseball in Cleveland, the Guardians were, by midsummer, a cattle call long shot, 15 half games back as recently as early July. That's not losing a few games. That's a canyon between first and where Cleveland stood. Yet a torrid run in September transformed them from impossibility into plausibility. A streak of wins so consistent and pressure-filled that the standings themselves started to look like a different sport. Yahoo Theithau. Let's pick this apart. Baseball isn't magic. Comebacks are usually a mix of opposing collapse and your own hot stretch. Cleveland's surge has been built on pitching that hardened into a lock. In the final stretch, they allowed an extraordinarily small number of earned runs while their offense did just enough to win the close ones. Detroit's slide, meanwhile, wasn't a single thing gone wrong. It was a syndrome. Slumping bats, shaky relief work, and the kind of tight game skein where one or two plays stop going your way and suddenly the scoreboard never flips back. The Guardian. There are practical decisions under the microscope, too. Trade deadline calls, roster construction, bullpen management, all the moves that look fine in May begin to look awful when September heat settles in. Tigers management, which spent the summer believing in internal fixes and young talent, now faces the harshest question an ownership group can ask. Were we one piece away, or did we misread the team's floor entirely? Meanwhile, the Guardians, like front office, is being praised for steadying the ship and letting the roster find its form when it mattered most. Fox Sports. The historical frame makes this even more surreal. Since divisions were created in 1969, comebacks of this magnitude are rarities. Think the 1978 Yankees or the 2012 A's. And even those didn't always start from as deep a hole as Cleveland's did this season. The all-time benchmark stretches back to 1914, when the Boston Braves overcame a 15-game deficit. If Cleveland finishes this run the way they've dreamed about, they'll be chasing an all-time century-old landmark. That's not hyperbole. It's why fans are whispering historic instead of hopeful. MLB.com, what turned the tide for Cleveland? A few basics: elite pitching fundamentals, timely defense, and winning the close late innings. When you get to September, half the game is mental toughness, executing the basics under pressure, and the Guardians executed. Meanwhile, the Tigers' struggles exposed thin margins, a lineup that went quiet at the worst possible time, a bullpen that couldn't hold one-run leads, and managerial headaches magnified under the microscope of a collapsing runway. The Guardian odds and analytics tell the story with blunt numbers. The models that value consistency, win probability charts, Fangraph simulations, shifted from near certainty for Detroit to a photo finish where Cleveland controls its destiny. That swing in simulated probability isn't just a headline. It changes how teams prepare, how managers decide to play matchups, and frankly, how a fan base breathes on a daily basis. The math turned from expected playoff plan to must-win discipline. Fangraphs Baseball. So what happens now in the final days? The tightrope is obvious. Detroit needs to rediscover its offense, tighten the bullpen, and treat each game like a playoff elimination. The Tigers still have talent. They're not a busted roster. But talent doesn't convert into wins without process and confidence. Cleveland, on the other hand, has to manage nerves. Historic comebacks don't stop being hard just because the scoreboard now says tie. They force teams to keep executing while the calendar screams finish it. Detroit news. There are human stories, too. Managers in the dugout searching for answers. Young players grinding to find their swing under pressure. Veterans trying to stabilize a clubhouse that suddenly feels fragile. In baseball, momentum is as real as any stat, and once it flips the way a bayonet turns a tide. For Tigers fans, every close loss adds salt to the wound. For Guardians fans, each narrow win is gasoline for belief. Both sets of fans will remember this weekend for a long time. Freep.com. Here's the brutally honest endgame. If Cleveland completes this charge, it will go down as one of the great September epics in modern baseball. If Detroit holds on, it will be a cautionary tale of how a season can look over even after a month where odds were mathematically decisive. Either way, baseball is giving us a story that satisfies what we keep watching for: tension, reversal, and the chance that October will be reshaped not by payroll lines, but by dogs in the fight. SI watch for three things in the final weekend: who's handling the late-inning bullpen workload, which lineup finally breaks its slump first, and who plays with or succumbs to the weight of the moment. Those are the small variables that turn a statistical tale into a human one. On paper, probability books will keep updating. In the dugouts, men will keep making throws and taking swings. That's where the real winner will be decided. They thought it was over. On September 1st, the Detroit Tigers had a 99.8% chance to win the AL Central, and for weeks that number barely budged. Fast forward 2 weeks and the standings look like a different sport. The Cleveland Guardians, who were 15 half games back in July, have ripped off a stretch so hot it's turning history books upside down. What started as a routine late-season cruise for Detroit has become a stomach-churning collapse, and Cleveland's surge may be the single greatest comeback in modern MLB division play. How did this happen so fast? First, pitching. The Guardian staff has locked in at the most crucial time, giving up almost nothing while the Tigers' arms have cratered. In the recent stretch, Cleveland has surrendered a league-low number of earned runs, turning previously modest outings into dominant wins. A good pitching creates momentum. Momentum breeds confidence. One pitch at a time, the Guardians found their groove and never let go. Second, Detroit forgot how to score. Once a reliable offense, the Tigers have gone cold at the plate during this free fall, managing more than 3 runs in a game just a handful of times over the skid. Timing evaporated, big innings vanished, and the lineup that looked untouchable in early September began to swing at ghosts. Baseball is a game of streaks. Right now, the Guardians' hot streak meets the Tigers' cold streak, and the scoreboard reflects the collision. Third, the margin for error evaporated. As Cleveland stormed through wins, 17 of 20 in a stretch that erased what seemed like an impossible gap, Detroit faced pressure at the margins. Managerial choices, shaky bullpen outings, and a few brutal innings piled up. In a month where every game matters, the tiny plays Detroit once made routinely began to go the wrong way. That's how massive leads, even the ones that feel secure, can melt into panic. Where does this rank historically? If Cleveland completes the pass and takes the division, they won't just have won, they'll have eclipsed comebacks that rarely happen in the divisional era. The 1914 Boston Braves still stand as the old-time benchmark, but modern records show just how rare a turnaround of this magnitude would be. Whatever the final outcome, this run will be measured against the great September rallies for decades to come. The practical takeaway: Detroit still projects to make the postseason by probability, but the narrative has flipped. Confidence, or its absence, is a postseason currency. A club that freezes in September is hard to trust in October, and a team that rediscovers elite pitching and timely hitting at the right moment becomes terrifying. The next few days will decide